Hello, everybody. My name's Tom Williams. I'm a Writers Guild member. Until last year, I was chair of the film committee. Nice to see some of my film committee people there. Here, hi, hi. I have since then sort of pivoted into a role with Green Rider, which I'll talk about in a little bit. I just want to thank Kate and Emma and Leslie. I see you on here as well. And thank you all for inviting us to come and speak to members about this exciting initiative and resource that I hope you'll all find very useful and inspiring. With me today is the mighty Georgia Goggin. Georgia.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for coming. As Tom says, I've joined Green Rider quite recently. I'm covering one of the founders' maternity leave. Tanisha Samal is on maternity leave, and I am delivering the Writers and Directors project, which is what we're here to talk to you about today.
Brilliant. We have an hour. We have a decent amount of ground to cover, but given that we are an intimate group here, I have to say this is the first time that Georgia and I have spoken together to introduce these resources to writers. So this is as much for us as it is for you. We're keen to hear feedback as we go. We're obviously keen and willing to take questions. We've also had a few questions submitted in advance. Thank you for those. We'll try to address those as we get to it. So just to give the context on this, Georgia and I are here sort of representing Green Rider, and Georgia will tell you a little bit in the next section about who Green Rider is and the work that they have done and are now doing. The sort of intersection with the Writers Guild takes its has its origins in a symposium that we held last April at the Hungarian embassy, and I see quite a few names from here who were there. This was we called it a green writing event, and it was organised by the film committee, and it was an attempt by members and writers to flesh out some of their interests in what writing, screenwriting about the climate crisis involved, what the opportunities were, what the obstacles were that writers faced. We brought together a good crowd from across membership, but also the BFI sustainability team were there, BAFTA Albert were there, some screenwriting sustainability consultants attended. And the event sort of came to three sort of conclusions or points of action. The first was we discussed this notion of impact producers, whereby the subject matter of a film can be then launched into the real world with genuine impact and follow through. And that's a piece of work that is ongoing, and we'll touch on that a little later on because it does intersect with some of the Green Rider work. There was a second query as to whether we could get some language acknowledging the climate crisis and the writers' role in addressing it, in raising concerns and showing solutions. Whether we could get any language of that into the collective agreement that is being always looked at and currently being renegotiated with PACT, and that's an ongoing piece of work as well. And the third subject that was discussed was this notion of a writer's rider. And was there any way that a screenplay could be badged or stamped on the front page or otherwise advertised as written with green principles in mind? What are those? What does that look like? How is that formalized? What does it mean? How do producers react? And so on. And within the room at the symposium, there was an attendee called Kiran Dawal, who works with Climate Spring, which is an organization that I'm sure many of you are aware of. This is a funding body and also a lobbying organization that is looking at ways in which storytellers can change the conversation, can own the narrative, can inspire change around the subject of climate. And they've been doing a lot of work in this area, and they are also now partnering with Green Rider. Green Rider is one of the organizations that they have partnered with to sort of optimize their work, make sure they are working in sort of lockstep with each other, not stepping on each other's toes. Give a sense that there is a coherent narrative emerging from these different organisations. Kieran followed up with me after the session, said you should meet Green Rider, Danusha, and the other founders. Because she was aware that they were also having these conversations about how to expand the work that Green Rider had been doing up until then, which was primarily actor focused, to encompass writers and directors. So it was a really nice piece of synchronicity, good timing. I then followed up with Green Rider, and really here we are today, about 12 months on, and Green Rider is now ready to make a new move into widening out its church to incorporate writers and directors as well as actors. On that basis, perhaps I can ask Georgia to fill everybody in on the Green Rider story and what we're doing now, and what we're all here for.
Hello. Yeah, so the background is that Green Rider started, some of you may already be familiar with this, with actors in 2023. And it was founded by Danusha Samal, who I'm covering in maternity, in her time off in maternity, Will Attenborough, and Fainty Balogun, and they're all actors, working actors. Danusha is also a jazz singer. These are things that I can't cover her in. And they worked, because that was their area, they focused on actors. They were incredibly successful. It started with an open letter, gathering some really, really high profile people, including Mark Rylance, Emma Thompson, Benedict Cumberbatch, Hayley Atwell, Papa Asadu, Bella Ramsey, the list goes on. It started out as an open letter, and then it grew into the Green Rider. They had a great success with that, and the Green Rider was used on a number of productions, which led to them doing a kind of pilot report on how it went. But one of the kind of key takeaways from it was that their original intention, the campaign's original intention to make the Green Rider essentially part of people's contracts, actually wasn't the right way to go. And so they decided subsequently to try and actually keep it out of business affairs, because that's where everybody got a little bit spooked and it became contractual and a bit scary, and kind of risked jeopardizing people's precedents and things that they might want to take onto other productions, and all of these kind of things just got a little bit gnarly. And so they replaced that language with Handshake, which now keeps it out of business affairs and is about a much more kind of down to earth, grounded conversation between the person using the handshake, originally an actor, and production themselves. And the agent can also be involved in that if necessary. So now they decided to roll it out to writers and directors, which is what I'm kind of taking the lead on. The campaign has done incredibly well. There are now many, many hundreds of actors using them on many productions. Some have reduced their carbon by up to 80%. It obviously varies depending on what productions can do. But it's been very successful. So we're hopeful that it can be a useful tool for writers and directors. It's worth saying that it fits into a really large ecosystem of organisations, companies that are working in this space. So as Tom said, we work really closely with Climate Spring. Our work is also supported and uplifted very much by an organisation called Herd, which some of you might be familiar with already, which is an NGO that specifically in our case can help especially the kind of celebrity supporters that we've got feel confident speaking about these issues, because obviously everybody is very worried about immediately being called a hypocrite, especially that A-list talent, because they do often fly and they have big trailers and all of these things, and they're worried about being called out on that. So Herd is a partner, and particularly in helping them sort of speak out on that in a way that feels authentic, but also helpful to the conversation. So it feels important to kind of credit all those people. We also work incredibly closely with Writers Guild. They've been incredibly supportive. to us in making this document, hopefully work for writers, and we'll hear from writers whether it does. But the Writers Guild have been giving us feedback along the way about how they think it can work for writers. And Climate Spring have done that with the storytelling perspective, and we are also partnering all the way through with BAFTA Albert, so that whenever an artist, whether that's a writer, a director, or an actor, is asking a production, could you do this? Could you do that? Maybe think about this. They're going to be making an ask that is in line with Albert certification. It's going to be something that chances are the producers are already thinking about already, and are hopefully going to be pleased to have the support of the talent in doing. So the last thing Tom wanted me to say was a little bit about my background. I'm a writer and director and producer. Most of my career has been producing, and up until, I guess, a couple of years ago when I sort of pivoted to writing. My first feature, Pretty Red Dress, was in cinemas in 2023, and I was both nominated for that. And after that, having produced a feature by myself during the pandemic, I thought that's enough for now. Let me focus on writing, which is now what I'm doing. And I'm with Screen, so I'm doing that alongside working with Screenwriter, and I also work with Climate Spring as a kind of bridge between the two organisations. So I run those two roles. I guess everyone's a writer on this call. I imagine most of us know about the side hustle. So this is a very lovely side hustle that I'm doing, that really complements the work, trying to do a good job for Denisha until she comes back with baby
Saving the world as a side hustle is
saving the world as a side hustle. What can
modest.
I say?
I love it. Thank you, Georgia. I think it's also really relevant to note Georgia's experience and expertise as a producer. She has very much brought the a sort of producer's head into this, because we don't want this to be confrontational. We don't want this to be, we're all aware of the difficulties facing independent film in the UK. Anyway, we want this to be additive and supportive for producers as well. So it's not a them and us situation. George has been really helpful in the language, in the process, in making sure that this sort of steps out with the right attitude and the right mindset. Should be said as well that this is designed to work across film and TV, although those obviously have different pipelines and different areas of intervention. So the synchronicity that I was talking about was, it is good timing, because Screenwriter, they'd reached their second year anniversary. They were taking stock of what they had learned, what worked well, what could be developed. In fact, this notion of a rider seemed to be a bit misleading and perhaps counterproductive at times, but it's got such a strong brand within the industry now that they are keeping it as their sort of headline brand. But what we're going to be talking to you now are these two documents that we have developed. The first is called the Handshake, and this is the conversation opener that a writer will share with production. And then should that conversation opener go well, we then lead into some actions documents which give a suggestion and a starting point for actions that the writer can take, actions that production can take. This is not, as Georgia said, signed off by business and legal. It's not, there are not penalties for failure to comply. It is a formalized conversation, which we think is the best sort of sweet spot that gets this conversation out in the open and on the table without bogging it down in process and sending people running for the hills. Again, just to sort of recap, a large part of Screenwriter's success in its early days was capitalizing on the overweighted influence of the number one on the call sheet. So if Benedict Cumberbatch comes on set and says, I would like 1 day a week of vegan catering, or let's talk about electric vehicles on set, or and however that conversation develops, that's a moment of maximum leverage by a person who is critical to the production. In trying to translate that model to writers and directors, obviously we are faced with variance in status of writers say writers in feature film are lower status than directors, and they're probably both lower status than Benedict Cumberbatch, let's say. Writers in TV might be higher status than directors. Early careers writers might feel less emboldened to talk up than more established writers, and so on. So the point of all of these documents is that they should feel useful and applicable whoever you are, wherever you are in the process. We're going to talk about this specifically for writers, and my background is more in feature film, so I default to that, but I'm interested to hear from TV writers on this call where they think the sort of point of maximum leverage might be. Just to sort of say, this is not the widening of the Green Rider tent is not without its complications or without its perhaps challenges, but we feel that where we've got to takes the essence of that, which is that at any given stage in a process, any one of us as creators, as artists, will have a moment of opportunity and a moment to make our voice heard. And if you're losing sleep over the climate crisis, as I am, and as I think many of us here will be, and if you want to share that with production, whether your script is climate focused or not, and that's another slight difference with how the writers go about it, then hopefully this tool gives you some language, some assets, and perhaps some top cover and some support from the Green Rider team to help you have that conversation. I am going to screen share now. Louise, I'll follow up on your question at the end, if that's okay, because there have been useful pilot reports, I think, as Georgia has mentioned. So I'm going to screen share now. Please hold, caller. And I will put the green handshake up on screen. I hope everybody can see that. All right, Georgia, do you want to give me a thumbs up? Is that coming through? Jolly good. So this is a one-pager. This is what we call the Green Handshake. And if you go to the Green Rider website, and we'll give you these links at the end, this is the sort of the front door for Green Rider and the resources that artists can use. And the important thing to say here is this is the same for all artists, whether this is actors, directors, or writers. This is non-editable. The actions documents that will come later are editable and adaptable depending on the specifics of your production, TV, film, your role within it, and so on. This green handshake has been designed as a letter from the artist, you, to your designated point of contact in production. In film, it might be the producer that you're working with, or a representative of the production company. In TV, it might be your story editor. It might be someone at the channel. It might be your lead writer if you're an episode writer in a writer's room. So I'm just going to zoom in. Forgive me. For the benefit of I should have done this earlier, for our partially sighted members and viewers, I'm a tall, white, bald dude with glasses and a Hawaiian shirt that I hope is not too frivolous for today's proceedings, but it is summertime after all. Georgia, can you give your descriptor, please?
Sure. I'm a white woman. I'm 38. Is that middle-aged? I don't know. And I have brown hair, and I'm now wearing glasses.
Very
And
good.
I usually have a big grin.
That's nice. I'm going to take that big grin as well, if that's all right. As in, that works for me as well. So a couple of grinning white people coming at you to talk you through the green handshake. Has that zoomed in well enough so that we can read it? And I think these documents are all available. And a good point, Georgia, that we should make a note of. We should make sure they're all available in accessible size text as well, because we do tend to rather cram the words onto the screen. So I'm just going to read you through the headlines of this document to show you how we've constructed it. This is a green handshake, which is pitched as a collaboration between artists and production. We are happy to be supported by BAFTA, Albert, Equity, and the Writers Guild. And this, if you can imagine this in your voice, that you or your agent will send to production, and it's basically a hello. And I would like to work with the production team to make our project as fair and sustainable as possible. And then we set out our ambitions, which I think are universal and broadly, we're aiming high here. But it says together we can cut pollution and waste from our travel, energy, materials, and food. We can show regenerative solutions and actions on screen. We can tell stories that inspire social change. And we can use publicity to talk about our positive production choices. And we've taken these as probably our four sort of key asks and our maybe our main ambitions. Then the call to action is if you're interested in collaborating, I would love to meet and discuss what we can achieve together. Click the relevant role below to see a menu of actions, and then if this document will be submitted digitally, one must assume these are then hyperlinked to a list of actions for actors and producer, a list of actions for directors and producers, and a list of actions for writers and producers, which is the one that we will look at shortly. The green handshake is not a contract, it's a conversation starter. And then a bit of Greenwriter background. It was created by Greenwriter, an artist-led movement supported by over 500 actors, directors, and writers. There are publicly available lists of artists who have put their names to the Greenwriter movement. It has been used on over 50 productions, helping to cut carbon pollution by up to 80%. And then there's an offer of support at the end. The Greenwriter team is available to support us throughout production, and also a link to other organizations which can offer support and expertise. So that is the handshake, which is a one-stop shop to kick off the conversation. I'm just going to return to my notes and check that. And the one other thing that, I'm a working writer. I work on some climate projects, some working for hire projects, and my honest opinion is that the climate crisis trumps most other conversations in terms of urgency and importance. So I will, so I want to mention this. My concern is when and how to do this. So I, as a writer, am in a position the same as all of us. I would say, and so the handshake is something that I have used recently to good effect. I would also say that if you are anxious as a writer about raising this, if you think it might mark you as difficult or it might harm your career progression, we just want to make the point that all the main broadcasters in the UK have signed up to the Climate Content Pledge. An increasing number of indie production companies have indicated that they are keen to work with writers who are educated about sustainability on set and in their work. We feel that Greenwriter is a part of this sort of snowball of enthusiasm for and adaptability towards a sensible approach towards sustainability in film and TV, which, as we know, is a big user of energy. So that's the handshake. Hopefully, then the writer's sort of introduction will be heeded and a conversation will start. And then we move on to the actions document. I hope that's making sense for everybody. I've taken my eye off the chat in a second, but I'm just going to screen share now the actions document because I know we've got to crack on. We've got a lot to get through. Let me just pick this up and screen share over here. Forgive me. This is the actions document. That is correct, Georgia. That's come up, I hope.
That's super. Can I trouble you to zoom in a little bit?
I am going to zoom
If you
in.
wouldn't mind.
Hang on. Let's see if I can get us all sort of broadly on one page. I think that's about all of the text on one page. Is that all right?
Yes, perfect. Thank you. I really don't want to read the whole thing out because I think that's best sort of done in your own time. But just to sort of give an overview of it, the basic idea here is that you've had hopefully a positive reaction to the handshake. Someone has responded to you. Maybe it's the production manager, maybe it's the line producer, maybe it's the producer, and they said, "Great, let's have that conversation." you've then got this actions document, as you'll see, or maybe you wouldn't have been able to see this, but it links directly to a Google Docs. It'll make you a new one of your own. And if you want to have a look at it and edit it before you send it to production, you're really welcome to do that. You might want to have a quick scan. Let's say you absolutely know that there is some reason why on this production you don't want to have a conversation about catering because maybe you already know they're on it, or you happen to know that the producer is a beef obsessive and there's going to be absolutely no parting them from a steak lunch. So, whatever it is, feel free to edit this beforehand. But on the other hand, if you feel quite confident and you're actually just happy just to send it, that's also fine. You don't have to. But crucially, it is editable then for your conversation with them. And as you'll probably see, the structure is on the left hand side, there's things that the writer could do, and on the right hand side, there's things that production could do. Think of it very much as a menu and pick and choose what you would like to take from it. It really is super, super, super flexible. And I just taking something that Will, one of the co-founders, said. He loves to say that having 99 imperfect people working on something is much, much more effective than having one absolute purist working on something on their own. For starters, nobody likes the purist. But also, it's just not realistic. You're not going to be able to do everything. There's going to be things that are completely out of your sphere of influence as a writer, depending on your influence in the production. And there's things that just won't be relevant or won't be achievable. But hopefully, you'll be able to do something. So you'll see it like splits into different sections. If you don't mind sort of scrolling, Will, Tom, as we go. There's storytelling. There's going to be further down catering. There's going to be travel, energy, and materials, and then there's publicity at the end. I think that's everything. I feel like we should slow down, particularly, and just Julia, I've just seen your question. Can you give examples of successful, sustainable productions that have embraced those tools? What I'll do is once I've stopped speaking, or maybe Tom, you could do it. Could you just link to the productions list from Green Rider? Because there's masses of them now, and you can just put that link in the chat and explore them. There's been loads of them, and they're doing really, really well. I've lost my train of thought. Yes, I wanted to slow down and just talk specifically about the storytelling piece because I think as writers, that's really where we have a unique influence, and what we're the only people by and large that can make decisions about what actually ends up on screen. Art department have a kind of stealthy impact because they can make decisions about what props go in people's hands, and it's amazing the kind of impact that they can have. Like going the other way, when Harry Met Sally is credited with the single-use plastic water bottle explosion in the late 1980s, because after Harry and Sally, spoiler alert, actually have sex, Sally goes to the fridge and opens a plastic bottle of water. And from that moment on, it was such a big hit. So we do have a big impact with little things like that we write. If someone had written into the script that she goes to the tap and fills a glass, art department would have just done that. So we have an extraordinary amount of influence, and that's just the little bits of pieces around the side to do with what somebody might be doing in their actions. That's before you even get into the themes of your story. If you're interested in exploring that more, I direct you to Climate Spring. They have a storytelling guide. They also do lots of different courses and events that can support you if this is an area that you want to expand in your storytelling. It's much, much bigger topic than we've got time for today. But it is where you are and I should include myself in it, we're so powerful as writers and we can do so much. So if you scroll up a little bit, Tom, it's kind of sits in just this like quite small little bit in that yellow sort of corner there about storytelling, but in a way it's the biggest thing we can possibly do, and it's the part of it that we're the only ones who can do that. So it's the bit to kind of engage with the most, I think.
Yeah, directors and actors. If you choose to go to the website and download these resources, you'll see that their actions are clearly more focused on production, on set, on mitigations around energy and food and travel, and whereas writers don't get on set much. I'm sure we're all sort of aware of that, and yet we're the ones who build the set. We're the ones who sort of dream up these locations and scenarios in the first place. So there's two areas there. One is the climate content of the story, which is again, as Georgia was saying, that's something that's really fascinating. It's a sort of an ongoing challenge for us all. What's the right balance between preaching to our audience and sort of turning them off versus ignoring that this problem exists? And it's a challenge. It's I compare it perhaps to the Bechdel test. It's something that you as a writer can engage with, and rather than it being a sort of a tick list that you need to go through, it actually challenges you to write better scenes, more interesting characters, more original scenarios. And then over time, it becomes absorbed into your work and into your voice subliminally. So there's the climate messaging, which, as Georgia says, is more time than more a bigger subject than we have time for now. But then there's also the production mitigation part of it, which is this notion that your words have a kind of a carbon cost, and that everything that you write on screen, if the art department and the locations and casting, if they take those as read, they will all have an impact on the actual production of your show. And this is not to limit writers' ambitions, but it's just to get them aware of the power they have. And as we know, with power comes responsibility. Then possibly there is a responsibility to engage with production if you're lucky enough to move into pre-production and indeed production. And if there's a general energy around sustainability from all parties in the production, the writer clearly has a role to play then in terms of rewriting and editing their work so that it perhaps has a lighter footprint. And that can be anything from day shooting day for night. Can you combine locations? Clearly, these are sensitive issues. They have creative implications. We're not telling people what to write, but just as this is an idea I've always sort of played with. I remember writing the UK Film Council used to have a can you write a feature film for under £100,000? That sort of a challenge. My equivalent in this is can you write a feature film for under a ton of carbon production expenditure? And what does that look like? Even if that's not that's a fairly blunt tool, but I think for writers, it's not a bad one for us to consider as a thought experiment. It's certainly something I've had some sort of success with. So the story piece of it is very specific to writers. It's a part of this document that we are going back and forth on. We want to keep the document tight and headlines, but we also accept that this is where our impact can be greatest. So please take the time to look at these actions documents and think about how and where you might use it, because I think coming to the end of our presentation bit, we have a specific call to action for you, which is to engage with Greenwriter, with the website, register, sign up, download, and get your heads around these documents. But then specifically over the next few months, we're looking for pilot projects from the writer and director space. So, and these could be short films, they could be student films, they could be independent feature films, they could be you bringing them into writers' rooms that are at an early stage or that are on season 43 of Call the Midwife. We're keen to know what the strengths and weaknesses and limitations are of this approach across as wide a range of screenwriting scenarios as possible, and then please contact us. Georgia and I will give you our contact details at the end of this. We can support you in the early days of the deployment of these resources, and obviously would be fascinated to track the reception it receives. There we are in the chat, and and have this as the start of an ongoing process, and ongoing conversations between writers and directors on our end, and obviously involving production at the other end. There was a note in the chat about this was from Louise. Hi, Louise. About can producers sign up to this preemptively, and this is a conversation that we're having. And Georgia, do you want to speak to that a bit? I don't want to speak out of turn.
No, sure. Yeah, it's a great point, Louise. Thank you. And yeah, we are working on it because there is this sense of we quite often hear from agents, and from talent. Um, I'm nervous because of, further up the chain that this won't be wanted. So it makes perfect sense for us to close the loop and have it, come from the other direction. So we're working on a kind of mechanism for streamers and production companies and everybody in between to say that they are green handshake friendly. But it's early days for that conversation at the moment. But that said, the response to that conversation has been so positive. This really is wanted. Everybody is trying their best to do this, and I think that it's not for the lack of will. It's for the lack of time, resources. There's so much incoming, all of the things that we all experience in our working lives. But actually, if you make a tool for people, if you try and make people's lives easier, um, you get the result that you want. So this is why we hope that this is a tool that writers can use in order to make their producers, their employers' lives easier.
Yeah, and to Lena's point about the fact that there are many um, actors, still with significant clout in the industry for whom this is a priority issue. I think the fact is, Green Rider still has this incredible stable of supportive, high-profile performers, and if writers and directors can, uh, ride their coattails towards just a greater sense that the industry, that this is becoming the norm rather than the exception. That's something that we will leverage, and our community is really a sort of a ground up activist movement that the more people that make their voices heard, the better it is, and the more support that offers to people who might be wondering how and where to deploy this. We got some questions just ahead of time. I might just turn to those very quickly.
Yeah, can I rattle through those,
Yeah,
Tom?
yeah, go for it, Georgia.
Um,
Yeah.
so uh, I'll paraphrase the questions because we're all writers, so everybody really put their back into those questions. Um, so someone asked whether what's better to focus on like specific issues such as single-use plastics or a bigger kind of cultural point about being green, a broader sense of environmental responsibility. Um, I think broadly speaking, that's slightly a false binary, and that you can do both. I think what came out of the pilot report and comes out time and time again from other organisations working in this area is that leadership is so important. So what actors and writers and directors have in common is that they're all project leaders. Writers are very often generating projects. We wouldn't have the projects without writers, so they can set the tone about what matters on this project from the off. Directors likewise, if we've all been in jobs where you don't have a great director and the impact of that. So I think you don't have to worry about necessarily doing everything. It's just about showing your leadership and the things that you care about. I'm reading a fantastic book at the moment by Thomas Crowther called Nature's Echo, which is about feedback loops. And his emphasis is on doing the things that are within your control and that bring you joy and satisfaction. Because if you do that, the positive impact that you have through your enthusiasm, your obvious joy, your engagement with it, that creates a positive impact that goes on. If you're on a production where the absolutely only thing within your scope that you can have any influence on is single-use plastics, go after those single-use plastics. It really matters because actually for the crew, that's where they might experience sustainability. It's very confusing visually to have a production saying, oh, well, we're using green fuel, everybody's taking the train, whatever, because they've done those really big ticket items. But meanwhile, everyone's throwing plastic forks away and plastic knives every lunchtime. It's a little bit of a cognitive dissonance. So if you can go after the single-use plastics, by all means go after them. It's not the biggest ticket item, but if that's where you can exert some influence, like really, 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 every little helps. Um, the next one, carbon offsetting. Essentially, what is our position on carbon offsetting? In short, it's a last resort. We all know that carbon offsetting is quite a complex area. Lots of different views, lots of different perspectives over whether it works. Not all carbon offsetting schemes are the same. But as a last resort, it might be better than nothing. And there are realistically scenarios, especially when you're dealing with that high level talent, where it's just not possible to put them in coach on an EasyJet flight. That's just not an option. You have to fly them first class for safety reasons. So in such an event, what can production do? And Green Rider is that I don't think it's on the writers' actions, but on the directors and the actors' actions. We have a couple of carbon offset schemes that are considered to be better and more reliable than some of the others. But in summary, last resort. Someone has very nicely asked whether it be possible for us to do in-person events in Wales to raise awareness of the Green Handshake. The short answer is we would absolutely love to. And if that person would like to reach out to me, that would be wonderful. The long-term plan is to have people who are really in the bag for Green Rider and speaking up on these issues all over the country. So if you'd like to be our person in Wales, please get in touch. And then the last sort of in advance question that was shared was about AI and what is Green Riders thinking about tying up with other campaigns in the entertainment industry to tame the AI kraken. I wanted to read that sentence because I really love that expression of it. I think this is really complex stuff. Broadly speaking, I would imagine that Green Rider's concern is the same as I'm going to make a guess that most people on the call probably feel similarly, that AI, large language models, broadly speaking, are a threat to our livelihoods and our intellectual property, and also our understanding of what it is to be creative. Green Rider works really, really closely with PACT. We're part of the PACT negotiations because my colleague Will is on the Equity Screen Committee, which oversees the PACT Equity Collective Agreement. So as a part of that, they've been to LA and have been looking at the negotiations there between SAG and the AMPTP. So we're broadly in alignment with them, but Green Rider doesn't have its own AI policy yet because there's so much more thinking and research that needs to be done around it, and at the moment we just don't have the resource to do that. So you'll notice maybe it will feel like a bit of a conspicuous absence, but at the moment AI isn't mentioned in our actions. It was in, it was out. We came up feeling we're not there yet. But I think when the industry moves and people who've got more resource move, we can follow them. I hope that answers those questions. Have we got more in the
Yeah,
chat?
I can just address a couple of questions in the chat. One from Leanna. My latest production was Green Film certified. How is Green Rider different from these other organizations and initiatives? As a relative newcomer to this space, I have to say I found it a fairly bewildering environment to navigate, and there are multiple different organizations and certifications and classifications. I would say that Green Rider is very independent and it is very artist led, and it is sort of defiantly non corporate in that respect. It's about individuals and individual conversations. Which is to say that it's encouraging people to engage with production on whatever level they feel comfortable with, and also to Susie's point about, does the rider handshake enshrine an encouragement for the production to aim for Albert certification? I would certainly say that that can be one of your ambitions for that. And again, I mean, you look at how far we've come, but I would say that Albert certification now is, increasingly ubiquitous across the industry. Certainly, if you want to work for any of the major film funds, regional funds, BBC, Film 4, these are baked in advance, and so that you can point to them as as where we should all be heading. I think with what's different, and I don't know so much about green film certification, Leanna, I would say, but as far as BAFTA Albert certification is concerned, what's interesting is they don't really have a criteria, as I understand it, for story content and on-screen messaging. It's more, your level of responsibility in your production practices and your carbon footprint. So I think we can actually go further than BAFTA Albert certification, and we're in touch with BAFTA Albert. They support Green Rider and the Handshake, and I think we're carving out our own space here, but I would look to be more ambitious, and particularly in terms of story choices, I would look to challenge producers to not just think that this is a behind the camera issue, and that Climate Spring would certainly say that the real opportunity for you to reach out and change the world and touch people and influence lives and social change, which is one of the Green Rider ambitions, is through your storytelling skills. And that is subtle, that is difficult, it is ever evolving as the audience's appetites and tastes change as well. But I would say that certainly the writers' side of Green Rider is an encouragement for collaboration between the writer and production on being ambitious on screen and in your storytelling choices. So I think there's even further to go there.
If I can chime in there on those two questions from Liana and Susie, because they overlap, I think the main thing to say to Liana's thing is Green Rider doesn't certify. We can't give you a badge. There's no kind of points for using a handshake for a production. But I think in answer to both questions, the major difference is leadership. My experience was, I produced Pretty Red Dress, and it was Albert certified, and it was perfectly possible to do that. I was, to the extent that it was possible during the pandemic, because it was a single-use plastic bonanza. But I was very committed, obviously, to making the production green. But I did that without. I don't think I had a single conversation with the cast about it. I don't think I spoke to the writer or director about it. To my thinking at the time, it was an entirely production focused operation. So I think that is the difference. That's what Green Rider can facilitate in collaboration with all these other organisations, is that it's a way of engaging some of the leaders on set with these issues. It's not an alternative, it's only additive.
And also, I think we're in uncharted waters here for Green Rider, because previously the actors would arrive on set or after they've been cast, and they would bring these sustainability conversations with them on set, and then, or if all went well, the set would the production would register with Green Rider, and it would be sort of acknowledged as a production that had embraced the principles of Green Rider. And if you go and look at that list of productions I shared, it's broad and it is deep and it is impressive. What we've got now with writers, directors, and actors all having Green Rider resources is we've got multiple different opportunities for breaking the ice and for getting the production moving in the right direction. And so potentially a director or an actor might come onto a production and send their own handshake, at which point the producer might, in an ideal world, say, well, thank you. We've been working with the writer on Green Rider principles from the start. It's great to hear that you're involved at the read through or at the kickoff meeting. Sorry, telephone going. At the writer or at the kickoff meeting, we're going to want this. We can bring in representatives from Green Rider to talk about the opportunities and so on. So it's hopefully these synergies will start to make themselves felt, and yeah, the sort of these artist conversations will no longer be siloed, and they'll be felt across the whole conversation. Sorry, that was my
Um,
wife leaving an emergency message on the phone. I'm just going to go on to
yeah,
mute.
attend to
Georgia,
that.
you've got this
I've
for a
got
second.
this for a sec. Yeah, you do that. Barring an explosive cough, I'll be good. So someone has asked, once the document has been read, is there an action following the agreement as there isn't a signature per se? No, there isn't. And for a little while, there was a signature at the end, and then that just was not the vibe. So we took it off. The most likely next step, assuming that this has stayed in your menu of things that you want to do, is that you'll have meetings set. So they'll be, if you're having a read through or if you're going to be at the pre-production meeting, you'll have opportunities sort of baked into the schedule, the production schedule, to kind of then spread the word about these. You might be assembling a green team. The green team could involve you, depending on how long you're going to be, touching base with the production. It might be involving other heads of department. If there's a sustainability team on set, it might involve them as well, to start to kind of have the conversations around this issue. If if I could advocate, on your behalf for anything to keep in, aside from the storytelling kind of top left corner, which we talked about, I would say that those meetings are probably the most impactful thing that you can do, because they are the thing that facilitates leadership, and everything kind of trickles down from there. When the crew and the cast can see that the people in charge really care about this and that they are taking action themselves and it's consistent and time is made for it, action takes place. So that's how you move from the actions document into action itself. Does that answer the question? Super.
And I would just say, please let's make this the start of sort of individual conversations. Georgia and I are keen to talk to other writers groups. If you have writers networks, locally or digitally, that you think would benefit from this, from hearing this, and discussing this, we want to put this in front of as many people as possible. But please also let's start to sort of expose this to the real world, and see how that goes, because this sort of makes sense in our heads and we're following a good model of Green Rider, but we really want to support writers as best we can, and make sure that really that nobody has an excuse for not addressing this as early as possible in production. So please do follow up with us after this.
We've got 2 minutes left, so I should wrap up. But I just wanted to acknowledge the fact that the kind of cultural conversation around climate has really moved experts who've been working in this much longer than me. Have observed this, that this year it feels like the conversation has really turned at London Climate Action Week. I don't know if anyone attended events through London Climate Action Week in June. Just over and over and over and over again, it was about storytelling. So I think you might find, if this is an area that you're interested in working in, the ground is going to get softer because it's kind of in the ether at the moment. If anybody is interested in exploring this, I really just want to emphasize that please do explore Climate Spring. It's an incredible organization. They're there to support you. They would love, I'm one of them, so I should say we would love to support you. There's so many resources, there's funding, they're such a resource for this, and also of community and strength in numbers. It's so lonely so often as a writer, feeling like you're doing this kind of stuff by yourself. So if you take away anything from this meeting, like, you're not on your own. There's lots and lots and lots of people who care about this. So please do get in touch with Green Rider. Do get in touch with me. You can reach me with my Climate Spring hat on that same address that I've shared. So reach me either way. You're not on your own, and we would love to support you if you want to use a handshake, or even if you're not ready but you just want to dip a toe into sort of climate storytelling water. We would love to support you. I've been told I have to bring this to a very neat close and say a cut point. So I'm going to do that now. Cut.